We're going to move to our next guest, as I was saying there, Kevin Alexander Gray. He's an activist and writer there in South Carolina. His latest book is Killing Trayvons: An Anthropology of American Violence. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Gray. I understand you personally knew the pastor of that church, Clementa Pinckney, so our condolences go out to you and to the community there. So when you remember him today, what do you remember? Who was he? What kind of person was he?
And two kids, 41. Went to school at Allen University, a predominantly black AME school, which is the African Methodist Episcopal School, maybe about 3 or 4 blocks from me. Just a very bright young man, always reachable, always cordial, always accessible, just a very good legislator. Of course, he was the pastor of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, which is an historic church in its own right. It was a church founded by Denmark Vesey, who tried to organize slave rebellions before the Civil War, and just a wonderful person. A lot of us knew him. A lot of us have organized in that church, have had meetings in that church, have sat in that church. So, if you're going to attack a symbol of black pride and history in South Carolina, that would be, for a racist, would be a logical target. And so in that respect, I'm not surprised a racist attacked that church, but, I'm still shocked that someone that I knew was murdered in such a way, that the people in that church were murdered in such a way by practicing young white supremacists, 21 years old, and of course, he had to get that from somebody. He probably got it from his parents. He lives in a county in South Carolina that's a heavily conservative Republican county. If you want to, of all the counties in the state, if you want to go to the county that has the most Confederate flags flying, Lexington County, South Carolina would be that county. And, people talk about why would he do such a thing? Well, South Carolina flies the Confederate flag on the State House grounds, this flag that represents white supremacy, the same white supremacy that that young man advertised on his jackets in support of racist Rhodesia and racist apartheid South Africa. He had to learn it somewhere, and he took out his evil and his hatred against people last night in that church.
And tell me, you were talking more about the church there. Tell me more about where this crime happened. It was, of course, a majority African-American congregation, specifically Mother Emanuel AME Church. What does that mean when I say that?
Well, it means Mother Emanuel Church was the first African Methodist Episcopal church founded in South Carolina. They call it the Mother Church, from which all other churches grew from. It was organized by a free black man in Charleston in the early 1800s by the name of William Morris, who left the white church to form the church. Of course, one of the founders of the church was Denmark Vesey. And, the church has come under attack throughout its history. It was burned after the slave rebellion. It was attacked during the Civil Rights Movement. It's the mother church. It's one of the most historic churches in the South, south of Baltimore. It's one of the oldest and largest black AME churches in the country.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Gray, obviously we're still waiting to learn more information about this tragedy, the specific motives. Some people are calling it a hate crime. How are you describing this today?
Well, all crimes are hate crimes. I believe that the young man ought to be prosecuted for murder, no doubt, with the animus that he expressed in the church, making people beg for their lives, leaving some folk alive so they could tell the story of his massacre, making the statement that black people were trying to take over, that they were raping the women. That's basic racist talk. And so, and people want to add extra meaning to that. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a country that's based on the ideology of white supremacy and white privilege. And there are a lot of people who are upset with their imagined loss of white supremacy and white privilege. And be he a madman or whatever, I think those that believe in racial superiority are mad. But that's the nature of American society. The young man had Confederate flags on the front of his car. The origin of the Confederate flag and what they call the stainless white banner, the original Confederate flag, was a flag that represented white man's country. And that's passed on from generation to generation. South Carolina was the state that first seceded from the Union. Charleston was the site in which the first shots were fired from Fort Sumter, on Fort Sumter, that began the Civil War. So, in the history of race in the state, in the history of race in this nation, once again, Emmanuel Church is at the center of that fight. And once again, a racist declaring his grievance over a loss of privilege, a loss of his white power, struck out against people who were merely praying to their God. And in fact, they're praying to a God that they accepted, because most of the Africans that were brought over from Africa and enslaved in this country weren't Christians, but they accepted that religion. And to go in that church of people that want to be Americans, that want to be accepted by white Americans, and murder them in such a heinous way shows no regard that you'll ever believe that black people are equal to white people, that black people deserve the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the pursuit of prayer.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us today from South Carolina, Mr. Kevin Alexander Gray. And once again, our condolences go out to you, as you knew the pastor there.